The queer community as a whole would not have the rights that they do today if it wasn't for trans women and women of color. Hi friends, my name is Joe Geyer and today is day 1 of Pride history. And with the United States' current genocide on trans people, it is more important now to remember where we started and how much we can fight back. When we look at the history of the queer community in the United States, the catalyst that really moved the gay rights movement forward was the Stonewall riots, which were a 6-day violent riot that fought back against police brutality in gay clubs and against gay people in New York City. The general discussion that ends up happening around Stonewall and what happened is who threw the first punch. And there are 3 people who are credited with that. A black butch lesbian named Stormie, a black trans woman named Marsha P. Johnson, and a Latina trans woman named Silvia Rivera. And I find this conversation about who threw the first punch really frustrating because what it does is it reduces all the good that they did in their life for the community down to a single night. So let's talk about what all they accomplished throughout their life. And we'll start with Stormie de la Verre. After Stonewall, Stormie would go on to be a founding member in the Stonewall Veterans Association, and it was well known that she was one of the inspirations for the androgynous fashion movement that was happening at the time. And to many, she was considered to be a true gay superhero. With her concealed carry permit, she would patrol lower 7th and 8th Avenue in Manhattan to make sure that queer people were safe. She did these patrols on nights that she wasn't working as a bouncer at the iconic Manhattan gay bar called the Cubbyhole. And these patrols would continue until she was nearly 85 years old. She was well respected by the community, and in her later years, they would help to assist taking care of her until she passed. Now, unfortunately, the same cannot be said for Marsha P. Johnson and Silvia Rivera. After the first night of the riots, Silvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson would take up leadership roles, often leading many of the marches against the police brutality. They would go on to create the organization called STAR, which stood for Street Transvestites Action Revolutionaries, which was an organization that pushed forward trans men and women's rights. And they had to do this because the gay liberation movement started to move more conservative and more white, pushing everybody else out. They also founded Star House, which was a place for transgender youth to be safe from the streets of New York City. And this is one of those times that I wish I could say that the community rallied behind them and the projects they were doing, but they did not. Marsha would spend the rest of her life struggling with homelessness, and she would have to rely on sex work to have an income. And her life would be cut short when on July 6, 1992, her body would be found in the Hudson River. The police deemed her death a suicide, but at this time, their violence against the trans community was at an all-time high, and it is believed that they did not do a proper investigation into her death. But in 2002, her death would be reclassified as undetermined and still remains an open case in New York City. Now, Silvia also struggled with homelessness, but would leave New York City to get out of that lifestyle. But she would return to New York City upon hearing about Marsha's death, and she would go on to be an activist for the rest of her life. For a long time, she would also butt heads with the gay liberation movement because they were not very inclusive of trans people and people of color for a long time. Star House would become a full-fledged organization, and it would be where Silvia would spend the last few years of her life. I recognize all 3 of these women on day 1 of Pride history because not just what they did at Stonewall and the days afterwards, but for the care and compassion they had for the fellow people in our community. And because their stories are a great reminder of the strength that our community has when we are fighting together. Come back tomorrow for Pride History Day 2, and as always, happy Pride.